Crank up that radio. Let me tell y'all a story.
Filters are optional rings you can screw onto the end of your lens to filter light in additional ways.
Everything we've talked about so far is comparable to your eye.
The sensor is like the retina in the back of your eyeball. The shutter is like your eyelid blinking. And the aperture is like your pupil getting bigger and smaller.
Continuing this analogy, filters are like glasses or sunglasses for your camera.
We use two filters here at Afterimage Documentary.
ND filters and UV filters.
Down that wide highway, coming like crowds.
ND filters act like sunglasses for your camera. They reduce the light and darken the image when it's too bright.
Our ND filters are called variable ND filters because you can turn them to get increasing steps of darkness, allowing you to bring down your exposure by one stop or several stops.
Let's say you have a lot of good light. For instance, if you are interviewing outside, you've set your ISO or sensitivity low at 200, your shutter speed is at 50 where it's supposed to be. You can't change much there to deal with the bright light. You would need to darken your image with a small aperture opening, like 22. Okay, but does that mean you are stuck with the deep focus a small aperture creates, even though you wanted to blur the background and have a shallow focus? We'll turn to filters to solve this problem.
So instead, you open your aperture as wide as you can, and you put the ND filter on in order to get the correct exposure.
The next two items affect exposure only minimally, but they do affect the light. So we'll talk about them here while we are discussing filters. The primary function of a UV filter is to filter out ultraviolet light from the sun.
Think of a store sign that starts to fade in the blasting rays of the Florida sun. That's the effect that UV light can have on your image. It can bleach it out a bit. With the UV filter, your colors will be well saturated within your footage.
UV filters should always be on the end of every lens because, in addition to their filtering function, we use them to protect our lenses from damage.
There are two occasions when you might need to take the UV filter off. If you do, return it immediately to the end of the lens.
When your light conditions are impossibly dark, and you need some way of getting just a bit more exposure, you can try taking off the UV filter to see if it helps. If you find that you are getting ghost images or light artifacts, such as spots or other weird light reflections in your image, it can be because the light is bouncing around between the filter and the lens, creating the problem.
The lens hood functions similarly to our UV filter in that they both protect the lens and filter out unwanted light. A lens hood is like a visor or a baseball cap for your lens. Just as a baseball cap shades your eyes from light rays, allowing you to see more clearly, a lens hood shades the lens from stray light coming in from the sides.
The effect of this shade on your image is twofold. You won't get stray lens flare, which are what we call those dots and streaks of light that show up in the image. Sometimes we might think they are cool or that they communicate to our viewer that it is hot or bright. But most often, we should avoid them. But the second effect on your image are deeper blacks, more detail, and a more saturated, dense image overall.
The lens hood can be found in every lens bag, and anytime you are shooting outside or even inside with lots of lights around, Your lens hood should be screwed on to the end of your lens.
In fact, it's best to think of it the way you do your UV filter. As a default, it should be on the end of the lens.